Good evening, friends. Myself, Dr. Nidhi Darbari, on My Education Treasure. In my previous video, I had explained about the phases of microteaching. Today, in my present video, I am going to discuss the other aspects of microteaching and its advantages and disadvantages. The other aspects of microteaching, the functions of the teacher trainees. The teacher trainee has a lot of responsibility in microteaching situation and has to carry out many functions. In the microteaching situation, the teacher trainee has to function as a teacher, student as source of feedback and as evaluator, video operator and organizer of micro lesson session. The teacher trainee as teacher. During a micro teaching situation, the student acts as teacher when he designs and prepares his micro lesson and presents it to his fellow students while simultaneously practicing the teaching skill in focus. The teacher trainee as student. The teacher trainee fulfills his function as students when his fellow students presents a micro lesson to him. This is very important function because the credibility, the ingenuity and sincerity with which he carries out his role greatly will influence the progress and the success of his fellow students who acts as teachers. It is necessary that the teacher trainee who act as teacher be informed of the following matter before the presentation of the micro lesson begins: the presumed grade level on which the micro lesson is presented so the students can act accordingly, the foreknowledge that the students ought to have at their disposal and what presumably they don't yet know. This includes the following. The teacher trainee must put themselves in the place of students of a particular grade with respect to level of thinking, language usage, typical behavior. The teacher trainee must create for them self gaps in knowing regarding the learning content in question and with which they should already be acquainted. The teacher trainee can challenge in responsible ways the student who act as teacher. This can be done by well planned activities such as questions and patterns of behavior. The teacher trainee as source of feedback and as evaluator. After the presentation of the micro lesson, the teacher trainee acts as the source of feedback and evaluator. In the first place, he is source of feedback and evaluator of his own micro lesson, and in the second place also of his fellow students' micro lesson. With respect to feedback and evaluation, he ought to be able to do the following: make well-founded judgments regarding his own and his fellow student action, positive or negative. Assign a justified score for each evaluation criterion for his own and his fellow students' activities. Make well-founded recommendations for improving his own and his fellow students' micro lesson presentation. Although at first sight it might be difficult for teacher trainees meaningfully and accountably to provide feedback and to evaluate themselves and fellow students, especially where evaluations results in a score, it is necessary that they keep the following points in mind. The teacher trainee must realize that microteaching is a training situation and that feedback and evaluating must be aimed only at helping the students reap the greatest advantage from the training. Teacher trainee must realize that feedback and evaluating only provide indications of the degree to which they have been able to practice successfully the teaching skill aimed at. The teacher trainee must also realize that their feedback and evaluating only have one aim, namely to help the other students improve their activity and to achieve greater success. Although no one wants their deficiencies, imperfections and gaps shown, the teacher trainee needs to realize that identifying, indicating and directing attention to these matters precisely is what promotes the improvement of executing the teaching skill of concern. The teacher trainee must offer feedback and evaluate with the intention to provide assistance. Teacher trainee must have to realize that their feedback and evaluating always must be justifiable. The teacher trainee must realize that with their feedback and evaluating, their integrity is put into play because of the high premium placed on their honesty, especially when an evaluation results as a score. The teacher trainee must realize that their feedback and evaluating make a valuable contribution to the student's progress in mastering the teaching skill and focus. Students must realize that scoring or rating micro lesson provides them with a better skills by which they can identify those aspects in need of attention and therefore improve them. Identifying and mentioning good and outstanding moments in the presentation of the microlesson need to be seized by the students as starting point for and as a source of encouragement and motivation for more practice and improvement. The teacher trainee as video operator. If video equipment is used to make records of the micro lesson and to provide feedback, the teacher trainee must have to be able to handle the equipment during the recording and replay. Only the most elementary operations that easily can be carried out by the most inexperienced person after brief training are expected of the students. These operations include the following: follow the subject student as a teacher with a video camera, focus on the subject, zoom in and out on the subject, insert and eject the video cassette, make a recording of video and audio, playback a recording, interrupt a recording and the playback. Some students' interest in the video equipment is aroused and they quickly become professionals, amateurs in the matter. The teacher trainee as organizer of micro lesson session. During the micro lesson session, the teacher trainee is expected to act as organizer of the session so it can progress in an orderly way. This includes aspects such as following: in what order will the teacher trainee act as teacher, as student and as video operator? Who will serve as timekeeper and give the signs for beginning the presentation of the micro lesson? Give a warning sign when the time almost has expired and also when it finally does expire. Who will handle the video equipment during the feedback and evaluation? The function of the teacher educator. The task of the teacher educator supervisor is twofold: preparing the teacher trainee for his eventual presentation of the micro lesson and providing feedback and evaluating the teacher trainee after his micro lesson presentation. The function of the subject didactic instructor. The subject didactic training, more than any other training modality, forms the bridge between theory and practice. Because subject didactics is closest to practice, the subject didactic instructor knows how his students should be guided to interpret and refine the general didactic structures and principles with the aim of practicing the teaching skill of concern during the micro lesson plan. The functions of the subject didactic instructor especially is in guiding the teacher trainees with respect to the choice of the nature of learning content, the choice of the amount of learning content, the attainment of harmony between the content aspect, what, and the form aspect, how of the micro lesson, so that the most effective practice of teaching skill of the concern can be accomplished. The total design and preparation of the micro lesson plan. The advantages of micro teaching. The main advantages of micro lesson teaching is: micro teaching is a training device for improving teaching practice and to prepare effective teachers. It helps in reducing the complexities of the normal classroom teaching. It is scaled down teaching as it reduces the size of the class and duration of the lesson and provides proper opportunities for practicing one competent teaching skill at a time by using single concept of the content. It offers the students the opportunity to more easily and purposefully practice teaching skills. It provides the students with a context in which his primary responsibility is to learn to teach more effectively without the urgency of taking into account the needs and demands of the students. If you found the video to be informative and interesting, I request you all to please give a like to the video to motivate me, share it for others and subscribe it so that whenever I upload a new video, you will get a notification. It offers the students the opportunity to systematically analyze and evaluate his teaching. It is useful for pre-service and in-service teacher education program. The practice of teaching skills creates the possibility of forming a bridge between theory and practice. The student himself or under the guidance of a teacher educator can easily correct problems. Micro-teaching has a provision of immediate, systematic, pinpointed and objective feedback. No additional arrangements for transportation, housing, supervision need to be made. It gives each student the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to the improvement of his fellow students. The objectives of microteaching can be written more clearly and specifically. It can be done either in real classroom conditions or in simulated conditions. The use of microteaching method helps in research work related to classroom teaching. It is an economical device and use of videotapes enables the trainee to analyze his own teaching performance. In microteaching, self-evaluation is possible by tape recorder and video tape. Microteaching provides economy in mastering the teaching skills. It saves time and energy of the student. The training of teachers becomes individualized, and individualized training may work for the development of teaching skill at his own rate depending on his own teaching abilities. The main disadvantages of microteaching are that microteaching is skill oriented and not content oriented. It covers only a few specific skills. The lack of material resources like video recording facility and trained supervisors. The question of integrating the skill is quite challenging. Teaching is not just a summation of teaching skill. Certain teaching skills can only be acquired if students are taught. Microteaching tends to reduce creativity of teachers. Students cannot reap the full advantage of developing self-confidence from the situation. Microteaching can be carried out successfully in controlled environment only. It is a very time-consuming. The application of microteaching to new teaching practices is limited. And microteaching alone may not be adequate. It needs to be supplemented and integrated with other teaching techniques like interaction analysis, simulated teachings, etc. Microteaching disturbs normal class timetable. It is unrealistic situation. The interaction during the micro lesson in many respects is an artificial interaction. In this way, the students cannot form a very clear image of the real teaching situation. Teacher trainees might find it difficult to talk to fellow students as if they are students. Teacher trainees may be reserved and restrained because they are reluctant to critique fellow students. Teacher trainees who act as students can become bored with the learning content. Fellow students for knowledge of a subject area might allow the practice of a particular skill to miscarry. Thank you very much for patiently watching the video and don't forget to subscribe.